Hey everybody, Trey here. Welcome back to another video. Back with a forecast discussion today for our much anticipated severe weather event that is set to begin on Wednesday, February 15th, and go through Thursday, February 16th. We now have a slight risk for Wednesday from northeast Texas, southeast Oklahoma, through much of Arkansas into the Mississippi River Valley. And then on day 4, Thursday, we have a pretty widespread area of risk extending all the way from the Gulf Coast states, Mississippi and Alabama, into western Georgia, up through the Great Lakes region toward the Ohio vicinity. So a very widespread severe weather risk is apparent with this particular event. We've seen the models go through some changes over the past few days. We're going to take a look in this video, first at the current state of the atmosphere, at some observed data, and then we'll go into comparing and contrasting some of the different models that we have at our disposal. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's first take a look at our water vapor satellite imagery, as we always do. Very eye-catching map here. You see a number of different features. Big old trough here out across the East Coast moving into the Atlantic. A little bit of troughiness up here as well into the Great Lakes vicinity. And then back here, down across the desert Southwest and into the Pacific Northwest, we have a couple of systems. This big old swirl here, centered over kind of southwest Arizona right now. That is actually not going to be our main player for severe weather. Not going to have severe weather with this particular first wave. For the most part, we do actually have a day 2 marginal risk for tomorrow, Tuesday, for a very small area centered on kind of the Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri, Iowa sort of confluence area there, just to the northwest of Kansas City. There's a marginal risk for a supercell or two with a brief tornado and hail threat. We'll talk about that briefly as we get into some of the data here, but the main severe threat is going to come from this second wave that you just see up in here out across the Pacific Northwest. This trough down in the southwest is going to move off toward the east and northeast as we go through the next couple of days, and then this secondary trough will continue to dig down and be our main focus for severe weather on Wednesday and Thursday. Let's take a look at our upper air maps, and you can see exactly what we're talking about here. Big ol' closed trough here centered across southwest Arizona. That is going to be our first wave, or our kind of primer or kicker wave, if you will. And our second wave up here you see starting to dig down in the Pacific Northwest. That will continue to dig over the next few days. Very active pattern here at 500 millibars. Now, the reason that this is going to work, usually when you have these back-to-back waves, you'll have the initial wave will kind of scour things out. Moisture return will be scoured out for that second wave, even though if that second wave might be more potent, as we have in this situation, we might not have a severe threat associated with that second wave, because that initial wave kind of clears out the environment, the favorable ingredients for severe weather for that trailing wave. Not going to be the case this time. This first wave is actually going to eject a little bit more off toward the northeast, and so it's not going to scour all the moisture out completely here well into the Gulf as we might typically see. So we'll have this moisture that is going to start to get pulled up by this initial wave, and we'll talk about some of the low-level features here in a second. But this moisture will start to get pulled up here a little bit with this initial wave, and it's just going to kind of sit across the Gulf Coast vicinity, ready to be pulled northward pretty efficiently by this second wave. That's why you see such a northward extent. So that's why you see such a northward extent with the day 4 risk for Thursday. You see it extends all the way up into the Great Lakes region up here. Well, that's because we're expected to get moisture, at least some sort of moisture return, all the way up here into the Indiana, Ohio vicinity. So very interesting setup here at 500 millibars with this kind of wave train that we're seeing here. Very active pattern for sure. Let's go down and look at our surface pattern here right now. Just kind of take a look at things. You don't see much going on right now. You see kind of a low associated with that trough moving into the Atlantic there. Very strong low moving off toward the northeast there. Kind of some surface ridging here across the central and southern plains. You can see kind of broad clockwise flow across the southern and central plains. A little bit of a surface high pressure ridge has built in there. And as we know, as this trough continues to move, this initial trough continues to move and eject toward the northeast here into the plains, we'll get surface low development somewhere out in here. We already are starting to see a little bit of that out in here, kind of across the New Mexico boot heel vicinity there. Maybe some weak surface low development there, but we should get continued surface low development as that trough moves off into the plains. Again, that surface low is going to eject off toward the northeast, as is the 500 millibar trough. So we're going to get that moisture to pull northward, but we're not going to get that moisture scoured with the passage of these features. So that's a favorable aspect for the upcoming severe weather event on Wednesday and Thursday. Let's take a look at some surface data to show you where the best moisture is here at the surface. And we have been a little bit scoured since our previous severe weather event. We've had a little bit of a break in severe weather for quite a while. But we've had a little bit of some semblance of some return here. You see 50s dew points at least in through kind of south central Texas, toward the southern tip of Texas there into the Gulf, dew points in the low to mid 50s. So not very robust moisture yet, but again, this first system is going to be our primer wave, going to help bring that better moisture, those 60s dew points, which are located well down here into the Gulf. Those are going to get pulled northward with this initial system and be ready to be pulled northward more efficiently with the second system set to impact the the central U.S. on Wednesday and Thursday. Let's take a look at some sounding data here. This is from 0Z on the 13th. So this is going to be the yesterday evening. And we'll start here at El Paso. And one thing you see right away, very well mixed layer here extending up from the surface a few kilometers. That is our start of the elevated mixed layer. You can see it starts here at the surface layer, very steep lapse rates, very dry air aloft. Dry air near the surface extending aloft here at El Paso, and this is a strong sort of elevated mixed layer beginning here. So we should have a pretty strong capping inversion aloft as that initial trough and the secondary trough move off into the central and southern plains. We should get this transport of this elevated mixed layer over the target region. So we should have a pretty stout capping inversion in place for this particular event. We can go to Midland as well, and you can see some semblance of that as well, elevated mixed layer in place. And even as we go toward Dallas, we have a little bit of that EML in place. You see that very steep lapse rate layer, dry air just above the surface here at Dallas-Fort Worth. So strong elevated mixed layer should be in place for this Wednesday and Thursday event. And we may have some issues with that as far as getting storms to go during the daytime in regards to timing of the trough helping to erode that cap. And we'll talk about those here as we go into the model data sets. So let's do that. This is going to be comparing three different models. We've done this before in a few videos. This is the 12Z NAM, the 12Z GFS, and the 6Z Euro. As we know, the Euro kind of lags behind a little bit. We don't get that quite as early as the other two models. So we're going to look at the 6Z Euro for this particular video. First, I want to kind of show you what the trend has been in the models over the last few runs. We're going to start here and use the GFS as this example, but all the models have kind of done the same thing. This is the 0Z GFS from February 11th. So this would be the evening of the 10th. And we'll go through successive runs every 12 hours here. So this was several runs back. Started off with a very amplified trough. This is at kind of midday Thursday, so kind of in the heart of our Thursday event. You can see tightly wound trough here at 500 millibars, very highly amplified pattern. Now watch what happens over the next several runs. We start to kind of get a flattening out of the overall trough, and this is our 0Z GFS. So this is yesterday evening's run. You can see a much different look than what we saw with our initial look there. Much different look, much less amplified, more kind of sheared out pattern, much more positively tilted trough with just kind of now broad southwesterly flow across much of the region rather than a very well-defined, potent kind of wound up trough there, which would have a much greater threat for significant severe weather than this particular look right here. Still, widespread severe weather event is likely, but the models have definitely trended downward a bit as far as the overall potency with this upper level trough. So just wanted to show you that to get kind of that out of the way first. And so now let's look and kind of compare the latest model runs. We'll start with the NAM, 500 millibars. We'll go through the next few days. You can see that initial wave, very strong trough. And again, cold core, potential cold core threat up here in northeast Kansas, southeast Nebraska, into northwest Missouri tomorrow, Tuesday, into the afternoon, as we have very cold air aloft associated with this trough. All those grays there, very, very cold, greater than about minus 24 or 25 degrees Celsius temperatures right there associated with the core of this trough. We've talked about cold core events quite often on this channel. I'll put my guide to cold core tornado environments video in the description box below. But there's our 500 millibar low center. Here is our surface low center. You can see they're kind of co-located with one another, and we get at least modest moisture there into this region, kind of mid to maybe upper 40s dew points across this corridor right ahead of the surface low. And we've talked about this numerous times before. This is from Davies and Geyer 2004. Right ahead of that surface low is where you tend to see the greatest threat for tornadoes in these particular environments, even though the thermodynamics might not quite be as strong as a typical severe weather event. Let's take a quick sounding here right ahead of that surface low. So right at that Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri confluence area there, we'll take a sounding. Not going to spend too much time on this. You can see very modest instability, only about 500 joules per kilogram of mixed layer CAPE. 0 to 3 kilometer CAPE, though, is fairly strong, over 100 joules per kilogram, and all that instability is kind of piled into the lowest few kilometers of the atmosphere. So these are going to be low top storms. We do have a decent amount of low level vorticity to speak of, lots of low level shear here in this photograph. Some veering of those winds in the lowest levels, and so that should be efficiently stretched into the vertical with this fairly strong low-level instability. So I'm going to have to watch that area tomorrow for at least a couple low-top supercells with a brief tornado and hail threat. But again, not going to spend too much time on tomorrow's threat. We're going to look at our main threat with this second wave that comes through on Wednesday and Thursday. So here's our NAM run again. So that initial wave moves off toward the northeast, and you'll see what happens with the moisture as well. So let me go right to the surface dew points here. So as we get this initial trough, that moisture starts to kind of creep northward, but you can see it doesn't quite get scoured fully at all. You see those 60s dew points just kind of sitting there across the southeast into the Gulf Coast region, out toward southeast Texas. So those are just kind of sitting there. And you can see with the second wave, they really start to get pulled northward more efficiently. And we'll talk about the moisture here in the surface features in a second. So once again, the NAM, that initial trough, moves off toward the northeast, and the second wave starts to dig down. But notice how it just immediately kind of gets sheared out. That was not the case a couple runs ago. So the overall forcing with this particular wave, at least for daytime storms on Wednesday, is going to be a little bit in question, especially down here. We may be seeing a nocturnal event because that cap is going to be in place for much of the day across this region. And we're going to need some external influences, some sort of surface boundary, convergence zone, whatever, to help erode that cap and push those storms through. And, that's kind of in question at this point. So you can see as we go through with the next several hours here, that trough just really shears out. We get a little bit of an amplification here as the portion of the trough from Canada kind of digs down a little bit more, but just kind of a very sheared out, positively tilted feature with just broad southwesterly flow across this region. And so this is not the most favorable look for severe weather. Again, you want that really tightly wound, kind of compact system, strong, well-defined exit region, defluence aloft, to really promote significant severe weather. This is not the most favorable look for severe weather. That's why a few days ago, everyone was kind of hyping this event up as being a potentially significant severe weather event. That's because we had a much more favorable trough orientation here. Now, just because it's a positively tilted trough does not mean that it's going to be a non-event. There is going to be widespread severe weather, very strong winds aloft, very potent trough here still. Just the manifestation of that severe weather may not quite be as well organized or as significant as what was initially forecast. Now let's look at the GFS and how it handles this trough. So once again, you see that trough about 21Z Tuesday, very similar to what we saw on the NAM here for that potential cold core event in northeast Kansas. Very similar look right there. So let's move on with the GFS. You can see that trough ejects off toward the northeast, and much of the same. Now the GFS may maintain a little bit more here, a little bit more potency with this trough, a little bit better orientation, a little bit of a closed contour there across southeast Colorado, and maybe a little bit different than what the NAM was showing here. A little bit less, just slightly less sheared out here with the GFS. So this would be a little bit more favorable for a severe weather event to be a little bit more significant. But you can see the timing is still just a little bit off. We're still, the main forcing kind of not quite in our particular target region here by 0Z on Thursday, so Wednesday evening. Again, I think it's going to be more of a nocturnal event on Wednesday night into early Thursday morning. Now, a little bit different look here on the GFS. Let's look at the NAM here. This is going to be 18Z Thursday, so about midday. Notice we have a little bit better orientation of the trough here on the GFS, a little bit more neutrally tilted, a little bit of kind of this initial feature Whereas with the NAM, it's kind of just blended into one sort of positively tilted trough. We do have a little bit of remnants of that initial wave right in there. A little bit more well-defined exit region up here across Illinois and Indiana. Still broad southwesterly flow stretching down to the southwest here. Overall, kind of a positively tilted trough, but a little bit better orientation, especially up here into the Midwest states. So that'll be something to watch for sure. You can see the NAM just kind of sheared out, positively tilted trough, just broad southwest flow here. A little bit more neutrally to negatively tilted orientation with this little piece right here. So that could be something to watch for sure if this GFS solution comes to fruition. So let's go to the euro, see what it shows. 6Z euro once again. Same thing for Tuesday. So the Tuesday event, not much in question right now. Again, it's going to be very marginal, even for cold core standards, given fairly meager dew points across the region. But still need to watch that area for a potential brief supercell threat there tomorrow. Then our second wave comes through. You can see the euro also looks a little bit maybe more well-defined here, a little bit less sheared out initially than what the NAM was showing. Let's go to 0Z on Wednesday, or 0Z Thursday, so Wednesday evening. And you can see a little bit, you can definitely still see some differences in the model. That's why we haven't had an upgrade to maybe an enhanced risk for any of these regions, because we just still are seeing some model discrepancy at this range, which is unfortunate. We like to see the model start to come into a little bit more agreement as we get closer to an event. Not really the case here. Still not seeing a ton of agreement. Overall, the pattern is the same, a little bit more defined, though, here with the euro and GFS than the NAM. So let's continue. And you can see that the euro is a little bit more interesting than the NAM as well. You can see a little bit more neutrally tilted feature within this kind of broad wave here. So up into the Midwest states, that might be something to watch for sure, whereas the NAM, once again, was much more sheared out, just kind of one positively tilted trough. We see a little bit more of a feature here, a little bit more of a shortwave within the flow here with the GFS and the euro. So that'll be something to watch for sure. May increase the severe threat for areas farther north, help increase the overall mass response here. With the NAM solution, a little bit more sheared out, a little bit more just kind of positively tilted one wave here. Tends to be a little bit less robust mass response, less robust low-level response. But when you have a little bit more of a defined shortwave here, a little bit less positively tilted situation, we may see a little bit more robust development here with this particular setup with the GFS and the euro. So let's go down to 850 millibars here. And I don't want to go into super specifics yet. We'll do more forecast videos as the event nears. So the morning, so probably Wednesday morning, we'll do another forecast video. But right now we're still seeing some models discrepancy, so don't want to go too deep into the specifics yet. So we'll go to our low-level jet here, 850 millibars. And you can see what happens. That initial wave does send out a pretty decent mass response, strong low-level jet across much of the region. Then we go into Wednesday. Same thing should kind of happen as that second trough moves in. So this is going to be Wednesday. You see kind of broad area of low-level jet across the Arklatex region into the southeast. As we get kind of that mass response, low development out here across kind of Kansas and Oklahoma. See what the GFS is showing. We'll go forward with time there, same kind of thing. And so we get kind of low-level cyclone development across eastern New Mexico early in kind of the afternoon on Wednesday. Strong low-level jet out here at 0Z on Thursday. Kind of in the same area. So the low-level jet here between the NAM and the GFS, very, very similar. You can see a little bit more robust response here with the GFS. As we saw, the GFS was slightly more robust with its 500 millibar trough than the NAM. Let's go to our European model. Go forward with time, and then very much the same thing here as the other two models on the Euro. So let's move forward. We'll go back to the NAM, continue with our low-level jet. And you can see, not super robust. We still get that low-level jet, very progressive pattern here with the NAM, that low-level jet all the way out into the northeast states almost by kind of Thursday afternoon, with just kind of a trailing piece of that low-level jet into the southeast states at that time. Let's stop it at 18Z here. Let's go to the GFS. And with the GFS, you see a little bit, a fairly similar kind of pattern, a little bit less progressive pattern for sure with the GFS. So that is one note with the GFS. This may be a more This may lead to a more pronounced threat farther south with this particular solution, as the low-level jet is definitely hanging a little bit farther south on the GFS as opposed to the NAM. You can easily see the differences there. I bet the Euro is on the same page as the GFS, a little less progressive. So this is going to be at 18Z Thursday, and you can see a similar kind of pattern there. Wow, very stout differences there in the NAM and the GFS and Euro. You can see the position of this 850 millibar cyclone on the NAM is much farther to the northeast than on the GFS and Euro. Again, this is about midday Thursday. So the NAM not really, as far as our looking at these three models, the NAM is definitely a little bit of an outlier at this point, which is unusual. I tend to prefer the NAM a little bit more for short-range forecasting as we go closer to an event. So we'll have to monitor that for sure as we go into the next couple of days. Let's look at our surface pattern now. This is going to be critical as well, and given the 850 millibar low position, I would expect that we're going to see some significant differences in the models, amongst the models here with our surface low positions. So we'll start with the NAM. We get surface low development there across kind of eastern Colorado on Tuesday morning. Potential cold core event in Kansas on Tuesday. That lifts off well to the northeast and kind of has the warm, moist air sitting there on the Gulf Coast for Wednesday. Surface low development across kind of eastern New Mexico there as well by Wednesday morning, right in there. And that should continue to move off toward the northeast with time. You can see that the low is kind of strung out a little bit. Not really a well-defined surface low here. A little bit more strung out, a little bit more of a banana low, as we colloquially call it. Still strong surface low here, strong frontal zone / dry line right in here should develop. So let's take a look at our GFS run for Wednesday evening. So the GFS, as we talked about, a little bit less sheared out with the upper trough than the NAM, a little bit more well-defined surface low here. That can have a couple of that can have some impacts on our potential threats. This could be a little bit more robust low-level response, a little bit more convergence here along the front / dry line. That may help initiate storms in the presence of that strong EML that's in place across the region, given a little bit more tightly wound surface low here across Oklahoma with the GFS run. Let's look at the Euro now. We'll go here to Thursday at 0Z, and Thursday at 0Z, this is what the Euro is showing. Little bit better progression here as well. Still a little bit strung out with the Euro's depiction, but we do have a little bit more of a wound up surface low than what the NAM was showing. A little bit more backed winds here in the open warm sector could lead to a little bit more low-level shear as well. Now let's go into the Thursday portion of the event. You can see that the low lifts off with the NAM very quickly along that frontal zone to the northeast, and the surface low position kind of right here over southeast Michigan, it looks like, by 18Z midday Thursday. So there's our surface low. Cold front draped down to the southwest from that surface low. Let's look at the GFS. I expect this to be much farther to the southwest, and lo and behold, the surface low position is across the Illinois-Indiana border right here with a much more well-defined cold front out to the south of that, warm front up in here as well. And so let's compare these two positions. You can see it's totally different than what the NAM was showing. Way less progressive. That is rare. The GFS is usually the much more progressive model here. So that is something to keep in mind for sure. European model. This is at 18Z Thursday. And you can see very similar to what the GFS was showing, maybe even a little bit less progressive with the European model than the GFS, which is much less progressive than the NAM. So still quite a few model differences here with this particular event, even just a couple days out from the start of the event. Now, what impacts does this have on moisture return? So let's look. We don't unfortunately have the moisture here on the Euro with College of DuPage. So we're just going to have to look at theta E, which is kind of as we've talked about in previous videos, kind of combines the temperature and the moisture within parcels of air here at the surface. So let's look at our moisture return. This is the NAM. Once again, that moisture gets pulled northward, kind of sits there. Then we start to see robust moisture return here by 0Z Thursday. For the Wednesday event, this may mean it's going to be kind of just-in-time moisture. You can see by early afternoon on Wednesday, so 60s dew point still well down to the south, and then by 0Z we finally get that well-defined dry line here out across north central to central Texas. So just in time moisture here, not my favorite I like to see that moisture in place ahead of time. So we'll compare here. Let me zoom in on the GFS as well to the Southern Plains sector. And here is our dew point map. So same thing here. Moisture gets pulled northward. And then once again, just-in-time moisture. A little bit more robust dry line here on the GFS. A little bit stronger convergence maybe along that dry line. Let's take a look at the surface map here once again here now that we're zoomed in. And you can see a little bit different. Mostly the same here. Just going to all depend on the orientation of the surface low. But the moisture return fairly similar here with both of these models with this particular event. So storms may fire along that dry line / Pacific front, especially as that starts to surge off toward the east. And whether or not we see warm sector development is going to be in question. So not 100% sure we're going to see open warm sector development. We're going to have to really watch for any confluence bands out in the open warm sector. Perhaps a little bit of kinkiness, if you will, in the flow. I've used that term in the past couple of videos just because I can't find a better word. There's some kinks in the flow, some kinkiness in the flow, if you will. So that we're going to have to watch for anything that may help erode that cap a little bit better and initiate storms in the open warm sector. But I think the main forcing is going to come as that trough finally moves in and that dry line / Pacific front starts to surge off toward the east. Now let me zoom back out here and continue with our look at moisture as we go into the Thursday event. So this is going to be through Thursday. This is at 18Z on Thursday, and you can see the northern extent of that warm sector. It's very much pinched off here. Doesn't even reach really up into Indiana, into Ohio. Not really any instability up there. Those red lines indicate lifted index values that are indicative of unstable atmosphere. Now on the GFS, let's see what happens. We do get a little bit more robust moisture return up into Indiana and Ohio there. So as expected, as we saw that little bit more robust upper trough with the GFS, would expect a little bit better moisture return up there as well. So that's gonna have an impact on the robustness of this event, especially the northward extent of any robust severe threat. How far north do those more robust dew points get? How far north does the destabilization get? We're going to have to watch that closely as we still have, again, a lot of model differences at this point with this particular setup. NAM showing that stout kind of cold front, Pacific front / dry line there. Let's take some soundings here across the region. We'll start at 0Z, northeast Texas, and we're going to see some semblance of that elevated mixed layer, I am sure, across this region. So just ahead of the dry line, similar location here. So this is the NAM. And you can see 0Z Thursday, so Wednesday evening, we're still quite capped here across the region. Not a ton remaining, but this may kind of throttle updrafts a little bit and reduce the overall robustness of any updrafts, as we still have that elevated mixed layer. The trough hasn't quite made its way in yet to fully erode that cap, so that may hang around a little bit. And we're going to need some stronger surface features to initiate storms in this environment. Also kind of weak skinny instability, but the wind profile very favorable for severe weather. Long photographs, over 50 knots of effective bulk shear, over 300 meters squared per second squared of effective storm relative helicity, and so very favorable photographs for supercells, tornadic supercells as well. But again, this instability profile on the NAM not really that favorable. GFS though showing a little bit more robust instability, a little bit fatter instability. About 1,250 joules per kilogram of mixed layer CAPE, 45 to 50 knots or so of bulk shear, with about 200 meters squared per second squared of effective SRH there. So that would be definitely favorable for tornadic supercells, a little bit more favorable for storm initiation in this particular environment on the GFS. And so we'll have to watch to see which model run wins out in the long run. As we go into the overnight hours, I think we'll see an increase in kind of those photographs as well. Let's go to 6Z out here, kind of in the Shreveport vicinity. And then we'll go here on the GFS as well, kind of take a look at the progression just ahead of that frontal zone. So this is going to be the NAM at 6Z. You can see the wind profiles do get a little bit wonky and veered there in the low levels as that cold front moves in. So that'll be something to watch as well. GFS has the much more favorable look right now. I got to be honest. I know I tend to prefer the NAM at this range, but that's not really what I'm seeing right now. GFS much more favorable for severe weather here, much more robust instability, which is unusual. Again, the NAM tends to be a little bit more robust with its instability. Not the case here. The GFS is kind of winning out with that at this point. Not sure which one, again, is going to win out. I do think that the NAM may be a little bit on the cool side at the surface, as it usually is. We'll have to wait and see with that. GFS is fairly similar, actually. We'll have to wait and see with that. Some drier air aloft with these storms as well. That may increase the potential for significant downdrafts with these storms, but the NAM still is fairly capped there in the mid-levels, even throughout the night as we go into the overnight hours into Thursday morning, which is interesting. You would expect as that trough does move in, that it would start to erode that cap fully as it does on the GFS, but again, the NAM showing much less favorable upper trough orientation, kind of much more of a sheared out trough than what the GFS and the Euro are showing. So let's see as we go. Let's go 18Z Thursday. So we'll go kind of right here in the heart of the warm sector on Thursday, down here with southern extent, and we'll hold off on kind of the northward portion of the risk area, since we kind of have a disagreement between the GFS and the NAM with what we're going to see on Thursday. So this is going to be the 12Z NAM. So this is going to be 18Z NAM. Let's go to the GFS, and we'll take a warm sector sounding right here, and we'll compare the two. So NAM on Thursday for the southeast. Again, skinny instability, not many robust storms are going to be able to go up in this environment. Still a favorable environment for supercells and rotating thunderstorms, given strong veering of those low-level winds, strong deep layer shear. GFS, a little bit more robust with the instability as well. Still kind of skinny, though, on Thursday. The NAM and GFS are in agreement on that. So we'll have to watch that. Instability may be a little bit sapped there for the Thursday event. Still favorable photographs, large looping photographs there in the low levels between the two models. And so that's going to be kind of in question. Again, don't want to go into too many specifics yet. Quickly, we'll look at the Euro and see how it progresses with the warm sector. Those warmer colors, the yellows, reds, and oranges, are going to be where your warm sector is located. Those higher theta E values, those more warm, moist parcels. So this is Wednesday. Once again, a little bit farther west, dry line here it looks like, set up across Texas there for the Wednesday event. So that'll be something to watch as well. We move into the southeast. That warm sector does get all the way up there. Fairly robust warm sector up here into the Great Lakes states, Ohio, Indiana. So that will definitely be a little bit more favorable potentially for severe weather up here with northward extent on Thursday if this European solution comes to fruition. A little bit wider warm sector as well here down south. So the Euro definitely, I think, the most potent, along with the GFS, with their solutions. The NAM definitely not on board with a significant severe weather threat at all for this particular setup. So let's go ahead and recap. That's going to kind of do it for this video. We'll be back again as the event approaches, probably Wednesday morning, as well as Thursday morning with a severe weather forecast video. But once again, multiple days of severe weather coming up. Our first wave going to initiate a marginal severe threat, level 1 out of 5, for far southeast Nebraska, northeast Kansas, and northwest Missouri. Cold core threat there, perhaps a supercell or two, low top supercell or two with a tornado and hail threat. Again, fairly marginal even for cold core standards, but we know that cold core events can overperform and produce some nice surprises there. So need to keep an eye out for that in those areas tomorrow, Tuesday. Then we go into Wednesday. Our main threat is going to begin, probably going to be an overnight event, depending on how well that cap is eroded, the timing and orientation of that upper trough. We have a slight risk, level 2 out of 5 here for northeast Texas, very close to the Dallas-Fort Worth metro area. We'll kind of put Dallas-Fort Worth in for now. We will see refinements to this risk area over the coming days, up through northwest Louisiana, much of Arkansas, into western Tennessee, northwest Mississippi. All hazards threat with those. I think damaging winds, maybe some tornadoes, going to be the main threats with this particular activity. Maybe some hail as well. We'll kind of see. And then we'll go into day 4. Very expansive risk here up from the Gulf Coast states in through the Great Lakes region up there through Indiana and Ohio. Again, the northward extent of the Thursday severe threat is going to depend on the positioning of the trough, the orientation of the trough in the mid and upper levels, as well as the surface low. Lots of differences on the models at this point, so we're just not able to give exact specifics right now. We will know more as the models come more into line with one another, and we start to see this actual trough that will be our main focus here, the Pacific Northwest trough, come onshore, being better sampled by our weather balloon network, and we'll get some better data ingested into the models for a much more refined look at this severe threat. So that's going to do it for now. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next video.